landscaping educational program. Today, we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, and I think it's a favorite subject of many of us, springs. Springs are beautiful and therefore, easy for us to fall in love with, but they're also extremely important to our ecosystem everywhere on Earth, and particularly here in Central Florida. So what we're going to talk about as Central Florida residents is water. What are you doing? What are you doing to protect our springs? I'm Lilly Browning. I work for Hernando County Utilities. I'm the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program Coordinator here at Hernando County Utilities. And my email, if you'd like a PDF copy of this program when I'm finished, or if you have any other questions, my email is LillyB, LILLYB, at hernandocounty.us. These are the 9 principles of Florida Friendly Landscaping. Every single one of these can pertain to protecting our springs, because if you've been following my programs and my classes, you will notice, if you can put it all together, that following right plant, right place, watering efficiently, fertilizing appropriately, using mulch, attracting wildlife, managing yard pests responsibly, recycling, reducing stormwater runoff, and that all builds up to Florida Friendly Landscaping Principle number 9, which is protecting the waterfront. And it is interesting how the University of Florida, put this all together. They have created this Florida Friendly Landscaping program. They created it 30 years ago. Florida Friendly Landscaping is celebrating its 30th birthday this year. So I'm going to show you some more stuff about that at the end. But it all builds up to protecting the waterfront, protecting our water resources. And after where we stop with the waterfront, that's where the Sea Grant and the marine programs that the University of Florida, has established. Here in Hernando County, the Sea Grant agent, or the marine agent, is Brittany Hall-Scharf. She takes over, we kind of meet in that zone where the land meets the water, and then she takes over educating also from there. But we're going to talk about today, not necessarily surface water, although all the waters are connected. It is like, a big artery system. It's literally what it is that keeps our earth alive. We're going to talk about mostly the groundwater and when it finds its way to the surface. So what am I talking about when I'm talking about a spring? A spring is a natural opening in the ground where water flows directly from the aquifer to the Earth's surface. What is the aquifer? The aquifer is the area below us that holds all of our fresh water. So a spring is a natural opening in the ground where the water flows directly from the aquifer upwards to the Earth's surface. Also, it is the source of fresh water. The source that supplies these springs is fresh water from seasonal rainfall that soaks into the ground. Springs form when the groundwater is under pressure. I'm going to stop myself from singing here because sometimes Facebook then will ban me in several countries that I have violated some copyright. So I'm not going to sing anything about under pressure. But when the groundwater is under pressure and flows up through a spring vent, supplying flow to a river or other water body. So when the aquifer is as full as it should be, and there's a lot of pressure, then there are these vents which pushes that water upwards to where we can see it on the ground. And it can be an individual spring, or it can be a group of springs. I'm getting a lot of this information directly from the Southwest Florida Water Management District's website, and you can go to watermatters.org and see more details about this information. Before we move on, again, describing springs and their importance, we should know one of the main importance their ecological benefits are the main importance, but something that is going to, you know, speak to everyone, all of us, is that they provide a lot of economic benefits here in Central Florida. The direct economic value of Florida's largest springs is estimated to be over 300 million per year in our state. So, you know, it's an important situation. Did you know that Central Florida has the highest concentration of springs in the world? So that is why we are referred to as the Springs Coast. Nature Coast sometimes, but Springs Coast is a lot of what we, you know, get referred to as. And, you know, even though this was created 55 or so years ago, and you drive around Spring Hill, you may not be thinking about the springs, but then think about, oh, I guess that's why they named it that. We do have the largest concentration of springs in Central Florida in the world. And Hernando County is right in the middle of that great concentration of springs. So here I got this wonderful chart from the Water Management District, and you can see the areas that they call spring sheds. Spring sheds are the area of land that contributes water to a spring. Pretty easy to understand. Whatever water that land accumulates, however it accumulates, it is shedding off eventually into that spring one way or another, whether through sinkholes in the ground or lakes, other things such as that. So here's Hernando County in the middle of all these wonderful springs here. Here we are. So let's see, the bottom of Hernando County reaching into Pasco is Arapica Springs. Makes sense that it's named that because that's right on the Hernando Pasco border, and on the Gulf is the town of Arapica. So all this area here, and it's interesting that, you know, it's shedding north, but, you know, sometimes that's the way it works. That's the spring shed of the Arapica Springs. So whoever lives in this area, everything you do can affect those Arapica Springs. Here's the most for Hernando County, the biggest group right in here, this brown shaded area, and it goes down into Pasco, as you can see. That is our Weeki Wachee Spring Shed. So everyone who lives in this area, is part of the Weeki Wachee Spring Shed. I live up here. I live in what they call the Royal Highlands in the northwestern region of the county, and you can see this bluer area reaches, even further into the county, and I'm in the Chassahowitzka Spring Shed. So whichever spring shed you are in, and if you are in another one of the, county, you can read here. We have the Rainbow Springs, the Gum Springs, Panasofty Springs, Crystal River, Kings Bay, Homosassa Springs, Chazanwiki, Arapica, and Crystal Springs. Florida is just full of springs. So, and it's not something that is just a hidden underground secret. It could be out of sight, out of mind, but unfortunately, it's not out of action, out of reaction. Whatever we do here is going to affect that spring where we live. So what defines a healthy spring? A healthy spring has adequate flow. Only so much we can do to control that, but when weather patterns stay as they should, it has adequate flow. The Weeki Wachee Spring is a first magnitude spring. It has an unreal amount of water that is pouring out of that Weeki Wachee Spring. Only when we are in a extreme severe drought have cave divers ever been able to enter through that spring when the flow has slowed down enough to be able to get in there. But to have a healthy springs, you need adequate flow. You need water clarity. That's kind of, when we think of springs, we think of them being crystal clear. That is the sign of a healthy spring. It has to have aquatic vegetation. which that aquatic vegetation fulfills several roles, provides habitat for many different types of fish and other types of wildlife, removes nutrients so that there is not too much nutrients. It's a great filtering system, and it also improves that water clarity by filtering out the actual particles that are big enough for us to see that might muck up the water somewhat. That what we would call it seaweed, even if it's not in the sea, but the aquatic grasses, that's their job. So they help it maintain that clarity, that crystal clear look. They absorb some extra nutrients that might have gotten into that spring, and they provide habitat. Also, a healthy spring you're going to see wildlife. You're going to see fish, you're going to see wildlife. Other than fish, you'll see birds, turtles, alligators, otters, other marine species. I have lived here in Hernando County, I think in June, 78 to 23. So what is that, 45 years? I used to see otters all the time. Not sea otters. I used to see otters on the rivers all the time. Not so much anymore. I think they are maybe making a comeback though. Other marine species, and of course we all know, we hear it on the news every time it's going to dip and get really, really cold. If you jump into that spring, it's going to feel awfully cold to you. But if it's 17, 20 degrees out and that spring is 70 degrees, that's what brings the whole groups of manatees up together to those warmer springs to ride out those cold events. Now there are threats. There are threats to our springs. And that's why we're here, talking today. One of the biggest threats is, I refer to the nutrients that can be in the springs. Those nutrients include nitrogen and phosphorus. Nitrates are the big thing that we are worried about here in our springs in Hernando County. And that they come from several factors. Excessive fertilizer use, probably one of the biggest ones. Historic, improperly regulated wastewater treatment plants. That's no longer an issue. We have great wastewater treatment plants, but we're talking, way back in history and across the world that could have caused problems. Also, septic tanks. When we talk about septic tanks, and the University of Florida, the Extension Office, I think if you look back on Hernando County Government YouTube, they may have several classes on septic tanks. What septic tanks are created to do is to keep us healthy. They are created to keep the organisms that make humans sick away from us. They're underground, and they do a fantastic job keeping those organisms that can give us, deadly illnesses away from us. Unlike 1,000 years ago when it would just, run down the street and everyone was getting sick and they didn't know why. So, we've come a long way, and those do what they are supposed to do in keeping humans healthy from pathogens that may make them sick. What septic tanks don't do, except for new ones, what traditional septic tanks do not do, and what they are not designed to do, is to filter out nitrogen. That's just not their job. Their job is to keep, pathogens away from humans. There are new septic tank systems now that have, they've designed to actually work to trap those nitrogen elements and help them off gas rather than entering our groundwater and causing issues. So if we have new regulations. If you have to get a new septic tank, it has to be one of those nitrogen reducing ones if you're on a certain size lot. So that is, some of the areas that we are looking at is those septic tanks. I showed you the spring shed area. Within that spring shed area of the Weeki Wachee spring shed area, we've identified, or the EPA has identified, a primary focus area that is, really, affects the springs. And we have started a many-year process of septic to sewer process for the people who live in that area. So these are the steps that we're taking. What about the nitrogen? What about the fertilizing? We do have a fertilizer ordinance here in Hernando County, and I'm going to get to that part. Loss of habitat is a threat to springs, meaning that coming up to the springs, there's a lot less nature, a lot less place for, the natural critters to be. And as we know, it all works together as one system. Reductions in the discharge of the springs, because they just don't have enough there to be discharging, which in turn can increase salinity, because we are so close to the Gulf. And there's some saltwater intrusion occurring within our aquifer. And of course, that's then going to spill out to our springs and vice versa. So those are the particular threats right now. What is she holding here? She is holding algae. And we know algae is a natural part of our springs. And there's an algae called Lyngbia, Lyngbea. And it is naturally there, but when the water body exceeds its total maximum daily load of particularly nitrates, this algae, absorbs those nitrates and it begins to grow pretty much out of control. So then the area becomes clogged. The seagrasses, can't grow properly. Nothing is getting the amount of photosynthesis that it should. It just, messes up the whole system. So that is one of the threats that, the natural algae can overgrow due to the amount of nitrates in the water. What is a nitrate? Nitrate is a form of nitrogen. It's a plant growth nutrient. At lower concentrations, it subsidizes plant growth. At higher concentrations, it may stress plant growth. So why isn't it causing this, the grassy plants in our springs to grow more? For some reason, the native plants become more stressed with too much nitrogen, and some aquatic invasive plants will grow more, as will this algae, even though the algae is native. But so that's just one of the things that happens, because native plants have evolved to be in the perfect situation. If you change the situation and the circumstances and the conditions that it's in, it's not going to react well. A different life form like algae will, or invasive plants will. They will overgrow. So the problem is we have too much of the stuff that shouldn't be growing, and the other stuff not growing as much, because their conditions have changed and that's not their ideal conditions. Where do we, as we said before, where do we find these specific nitrates? Where do they come from? There is nitrogen deposition in the atmosphere naturally. It comes from, way up in the sky, from lightning. Water particles can pick up trace elements of nitrogen and deposit on the earth. That's natural. It's always been that way. Nothing you can really do about that. It just adds to the unnatural situations, such as urban and agricultural fertilizer use and faulty or old septic tanks, all those kind of combined. When I mention urban and agricultural fertilizer use, that has traditionally been over time. But if you're going to compare the two, just remember, a farmer is a business person, and they're not going to intentionally use more than they need to make a profit. The urban is, actually more of a problem, because each individual has their own quarter acre, and therefore they can each afford on their own to say, well, if 1 pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet is good, if that's what the bag says, I think 2 pounds would be better. And if each homeowner did that, you can imagine the excess nitrates and the problems that it's caused. When I refer to fertilizer, just remember, let me tell you, the label is the law. So what can we do? What can we do about these situations? What are the things that we have control of to protect our springs? Fertilizing, that is one of Florida Friendly Landscaping's principles, fertilizing appropriately. I don't fertilize my yard at all. I have a Bahia grass lawn. Doesn't look fantastic right now in January, but that's okay. I don't care. But if you are going to fertilize, as I just mentioned, the label is the law. 2 pounds is not better if it tells you 1 pound of nitrogen. The label is not only the law, it is designed scientifically to get the best effect for your lawn, and you may have adverse effects if you don't follow it. When it comes to fertilizing, I just want you to remember a few things. You need to fertilize at the right time, which is not now. Fertilize for the right reason, which is not because it's April 4th. I mean, you got to have, I encourage getting a soil test from the county extension office to find out if you need to fertilize and with what. Fertilize with the right kind of fertilizer. Again, a soil test will lead you in that direction. And also fertilize the right amount. Less is more when it comes to fertilizer. And here's the thing, and any master gardener will tell you, you will not kill your lawn by under fertilizing it. You will not kill your lawn by not fertilizing it. You could kill your lawn by over fertilizing it. And while we are discussing such things, weed and feed products have not proven to have good results here in Florida. Maybe they work up north, I'm not sure, but those are two different processes that should occur at 2 different times. If you're worried about spring weeds, which I'm not, because I have if it's green and mowable, let it go kind of philosophy. But if you're worried about spring weeds, maybe in the next 2 weeks, mid-February, you need to apply a pre-emergent herbicide on your lawn spring weeds. Not time yet to fertilize. Also, people have found non-target kills of shrubs or even palms that have been traced back to that weed and feed product. So it's just, even though it's cheap and it's in the store, easily found, we don't recommend it. If you have a fertilizer spill, pick it up, sweep it up, put it back in your fertilizer bag, or sprinkle it back onto your lawn. Do not, please do not hose that fertilizer down your driveway. It's going to end up in the nearest waterway. As I mentioned, we do have a fertilizer ordinance here in Hernando County, and let me make sure that you know that the way this ordinance reads is true today on January, 25th, 2023, but it's being revised. And it's being revised in a way where it's not going to be less strict. I can tell you that too. It's going to be more strict. The dates might be stretched out. And there might be some other changes, and I will definitely make you aware. It'll be all over my Facebook and when that occurs. And there will be press releases for the newspaper and other such things. But for today, homeowners are not allowed to fertilize their lawns from January 1st through March 31st. You can go to the store and buy fertilizer. That is possible. In 2014, when this fertilizer ordinance was passed, they wanted to get it through and get it passed and get it done. They didn't want to wait 10 years to go through a litigious process that would include banning the stores from selling it. So that is, the reason why you can go to the store and buy it. Some of them are being kind and not having them, out and available. But just because you can purchase it doesn't mean that you're allowed to use it. Your company, professionals are allowed to apply slow release only. And the reason that was included in there is because the University of Florida, if you look at some of their publications, will tell you you can start fertilizing around March 15th, spring fertilizing. That's good for your lawn. Absolutely not good before that. For you as a homeowner, that 2 weeks is not going to hurt you. Even if it's extended, it's not going to damage that lawn. Remember, I told you, you're not going to hurt your lawn by not fertilizing it. But they left that open. So because of professionals who may have many people a day, that they have to, get these jobs done. So, okay, mid-March, open that door to let you start getting all of your customers. If you have somebody trying to fertilize your lawn right now, seriously consider maybe finding somebody different. Your lawn has no capacity of taking up fertilizer right now. Sloughs off a good part of its roots for the winter season. It just can't take it up. All that's going to happen is it's going to seep down. And when it seeps down, where is it going? Into the aquifer through our springs. So, keep all those things in mind as well. Another thing you can do to protect our springs is reduce your chemical use. That's my way of saying control yard pests responsibly, one of the principles. Reduce your chemical use, eliminate your chemical use would be great, but sometimes I spot treat fire ants with a bait. A few times you do have to use chemicals. Florida-friendly landscaping would encourage you to spot treat if, when, where you have a problem with the right product for the right problem, but broadcast treating for just general insects, we completely discourage. You want to find out what your issue is before you treat it. You wouldn't go to the doctor and say, I don't feel good, just give me anything. But yet we try to treat our yards like that. We'll just throw stuff at it. No, you have to diagnose the problem so you can come up with the correct solution. And by doing that, you are utilizing integrated pest management, which we have classes on that. If you look back in the Hernando County government YouTube, you'll find classes on integrated pest management. You want to recruit your allies, not kill them. Most of those bugs out there, 99% of our insects are beneficial or inert, just hanging out, being a food source, not harming anything. Only 1% are harmful. So if we kill everything out there in our yards, we have killed off our allies. Most of the time, our allies are kind of native and the pests are not. And by nature of being an invasive pest, they're hard to kill. They're going to come back faster than all those native allies that we just killed off. Here we have a lacewing, immature lacewing that is eating up some of these aphids. They're out there, they will help you. So recruit those allies and let them do their job before we start just indiscriminately spraying. And of course, then all those chemicals through runoff could find their way into our waterways and into our springs. And that's what we want to avoid as well. You can install a native yard or native or a combination of native and non-native Florida friendly plants. All native plants are Florida friendly. Not all Florida friendly plants are necessarily native, if you can follow that. But put the right plant in the right place for its sun needs, its soil needs, its zone needs. We are in zone 9A. Now that it's kind of shimmied a little bit in part of Hernando County, like the southeastern part, or maybe even like from Avalon over to like Colbreth Road, Masaric Town, that kind of area is now 9B. Not a huge difference. It's just maybe you can experiment with some more of the more tropical kind of plants. But you know what froze, and you'll find out what's going to come back. But so for our zone, also, like I said, light needs, water needs, soil needs. Even though you're using native, just because it's native doesn't mean it'll grow absolutely anywhere that you put it. It still has to be the right plant and the right place. But a Florida friendly yard does not require a whole lot of inputs from you, especially chemical inputs. So, and that is then going to keep things in balance and, you know, keep the balance of nature going, keep those springs safe. Dispose of trash properly. And I am starting a campaign. You can see I made this bigger. Get your butts off the ground. I mean, really, people. This is so minor, this picture I took at one of our coastal cleanups. That was really just the beginning. We collected so many more. For some reason, people who would never imagine littering, because at least people my age, we all grew up, you know, we're not going to make that Indian cry. And, you know, the owl is going to tell us to give a hoot and don't pollute. So, you know, those of us who grew up in the 70s, we're not going to throw trash on the ground, but people don't think a second thing of just throwing their cigarette right on the ground. You know, in those filters and all of that, that's not necessarily natural material. You are literally littering by throwing your cigarette butts on the ground, and we see it everywhere. And when we have held coastal cleanup events, Brittany Hall Scharf holds the cleanup events. She's the Sea Grant agent. And this past year, in 2022, was the first year that she's been holding it, that cigarette butts were not the #1 item that we picked up, because everything she picks up gets counted and sorted. This is the first year they were #2. I think plastic water bottles were #1 this year. And we see them right beside the trash cans, and maybe you were told not to throw them in the trash cans so you wouldn't start a fire. I don't know, but find a way to extinguish them and put them in a proper receptacle and get your butts off the ground. It's going to find its way into the waters and into the springs. Dispose of household cleaners and chemicals and vehicle fluids, paint, etc. at an approved landfill. If you don't know where to take it here in Hernando County, here's the phone number to call to find out for our solid waste division. We have 2 transfer stations, one on the east side and one on Osawa Boulevard on the west side. Those are not landfills. Those are not dumps. They hate that word, by the way. They hate the word dump. The main landfill is on North 98. Go up 19 and turn right on 98. It'll be just a very short drive past the parkway, or you can take the parkway up there, Suncoast Parkway, and then turn right. That's where, you know, in the northern part of our county where our landfill is. They're going to take these hazardous things at the landfill. What the transfer stations take, I'm not quite sure of, so give them a call at 352. Wow, I wrote that down wrong, so you're going to have to listen here. 352-754-4412. And if you have some of these, you know, old paint, old insecticides, or the old oil, you know, antifreeze, anything like that, give them a call and ask them where to take it and how to dispose of it properly. Now this we're going to go through just quickly, but because I recently had a question at a group that I went to see, who were, they all lived right there on the beach, and they said they were told that throwing grass clippings into the canals, was a felony. We do not encourage by any means throwing grass clippings into the road, down the storm drain. We at Hernando County Utilities particularly don't want that, because our guys don't, it's their job, but they don't want to have to go out there and unclog the storm drains, and you don't want the floods that may occur because of that. Also, it is not Florida friendly to be throwing the grass clippings into any waterway. It's not going to just decompose. First of all, if you put chemicals on it, you just threw the chemicals right in the water. Not to mention, if everybody did it, then again, you have too much material clogging up the waterway, blocking the natural vegetation, even sucking up oxygen as that plant material starts to decompose in the water. So I believe Hernando County, I tried to look up, but I did talk to our code enforcement. They're basically going to treat that like littering. If it goes in the water, they're going to call it, illegal dumping. If you find it on the street, they're going to call it littering. So, and it'll have the same, punishments as that. So there's several things you can do with those grass clippings. Let them get back in your lawn. If you, mow your lawn frequently enough, just let them fly back into the lawn. If you want to collect them up, save them for a compost pile. Throwing them away makes no sense at all to me, to pay to do that, but that is preferable than throwing it into a storm drain or into any body of water. This I preach all the time about proper lawn height, and you're going to say, what in the heck does that have to do with saving springs? It has to do with the health of your lawn. And if you have a healthy lawn, you're going to be less tempted to try and pour chemicals or water on it, and that is going to help save our springs. Also, it's going to do a nice job of filtering. A nice healthy stand of lawn could do a nice job of filtering a lot of contaminants, before it gets into the groundwater. The number one way to have a nice healthy lawn is not overwatering. It is not fertilizing it. It is not, killing every bug in it. It's letting it grow to 3.5 to 4 inches. It is really that simple. If you have, which I'm going to say most of you have, either Bahia grass, it wants to be at 4 inches, or you have St. Augustine, you're going to say, no, I have Floratam. Floratam is a variety of St. Augustine, 3.5 to 4 inches. None of us have the dwarf cultivars. If, just the builder put it down, I promise you either have Bahia or you have Floratam. Either one of those, 3.5 to 4 inches. That's pretty high. That's as high as your lawnmower can go. Go out there and check that your lawn person is doing that. It is really the key to a healthy Florida lawn. Speaking of watering, everyone in Hernando County, whether you are on a private well, whether you take water from one of our surface bodies of water, just for irrigation, whatever it is, all 180,000 people in Hernando County are under 1 day a week watering restrictions for about 12.5 years now. It's not going to be changing. Here is your watering days. If your address ends in 0 or 1, your day is Monday. 2 or 3, your day is Tuesday, and on from there. You are allowed to water on those days before 8 a.m. or not and after 6 p.m. How much should you water? Well, that is pretty, that requires some talking to talk about, but let's first start with, I don't have an irrigation system. As I mentioned before, I have a freedom lawn. I don't utilize any supplemental irrigation. I don't live in a deed restricted community, so I don't have anyone writing me little notes. So, in the summer or most months a year, I have a pretty decent looking lawn if you don't look too terribly close. You want to follow those water rules because we now have 2 new code enforcement officers who they're hired specifically and only to enforce our watering restrictions. Pass the word. Pass the word to your neighbors and your friends and everybody. I got my first email with a complaint about that from somebody saying basically like, what the heck? I've been watering this way for 16 years and apparently it was wrong and they gave me $100 fine, no warnings. Well, that is the way code enforcement works. If they find you violating, you will get the fine. Now, if for 16 years you've been doing it wrong, I probably wouldn't broadcast that. There's nothing we can do about that, but I'm glad if this is the way it takes to educate people, spread the word. Now, these 2 new code enforcement officers, they actually came out of Hernando County Utilities. They know water. They know the watering restrictions. They will split their shifts so that they'll be working day and night and weekends, and will have access to deed restricted communities. So go ahead and pass that word. Now that we're in the winter months, shorter daylight hours, then, go out there. Is your lawn looking like it really wants to grow? So skip a week in the winter. You'll be doing fine. Follow these rules. And if you go native and or Florida friendly, you don't even have to utilize extra irrigation. In your yard, if you let it soak in, have more spaces that allow the water to go through the ground, and then you are creating your own aquifer recharge areas. In fact, I have a class on rain gardens. That's what this is, and I call them aquifer recharge gardens. That is basically what they are. They're allowing the aquifer to be recharged with water, and we are losing more of those spaces. If you look around, we are losing pervious spaces, surfaces to impervious. So how can you help the springs? This is by creating more of those pervious surfaces that allows the water, whatever water nature has given you in your yard. I'd like you to, as much as humanly possible, keep it in your yard and don't let it become stormwater runoff and head down the street, because it's going to pick up every piece of pollution that it finds along its way, and it'll end up in one of our waterways or in our springs. So simple things like directing downspouts, not down the driveway, but into a pervious surface, into a landscape bed, even into your lawn. You can buy one of those platforms, those rubber-like platforms that kind of widens the water out as it exits your downspout so that you don't have ruts. There are many ways to absorb that water. Mulch will help do that. Also, plants and trees, that's what they do. They absorb water. So the more plants and the more trees that you have, the more water absorption you're going to have. And of course, you want to go with the Florida friendly plants and trees. You can contain that rain 55 gallons at a time by obtaining a rain barrel. Here in Hernando County, we have multiple options to obtain a rain barrel. You'll get a rain barrel that looks exactly like this one, except it has, the ones I have now have a brass spigot, not this plastic looking spigot here. It's a very nice item from Enviro World is company. It's a good rain barrel. We have many options to get a rain barrel. We just had one last Saturday. Our next one is going to be a virtual evening workshop, where if you sign up, then I'll send you the Zoom link. It's going to be rain barrels only. And you can pick that up the next day here, or you can wait till the following Friday when at the East Hernando Library, we're going to be holding a compost bin and vegetable garden workshop. So if you want to attend both of those, you can then pick up your compost bin and your rain barrel, you know, at that same event. We're going to have an in-person one on a Friday on March 10th at a park here in Brooksville. And then another virtual one April 20th in the evening. It'll be a combined rain barrel and compost bin workshop, as will the in-person one in March. And the one for April, where you pick up your items, will be at our Earth Day event, which I'll explain more about as we move forward. Protecting from the ground up. I mentioned we do have compost classes. You get a bin that looks like this. It will have a lid. They're just showing you what's on the inside. That compost can help build up your soil and help build up the nutrient holding and water holding capacity of that soil. And also you can use it as a kind of a light fertilizer to top dress your lawns. It doesn't fall under any of the fertilizer ordinances because it's not officially a fertilizer, but it'll certainly help your soil build up. And that, you know, will also in turn help our springs. You don't want any unwanted garden guests. Remove invasive plants. Now, didn't I just say the plants are going to suck up water? Yes, sure. And yeah, invasive plants will fulfill that function as well. But the harm that they cause, you know, does not, you know, make up. The harm that they cause is worse than the good that they do, because they alter ecosystems. And they're, you know, you're not going to have the right animals, the right critters around, because it's not the right plants for them. These type of plants, this is Brazilian pepper here. I haven't been to the Everglades in like 44 years or something, nor had my sister, but she just drove through it and she said it's not open. She's like looking at the rivers of grass like it was, Alligator Alley. She says now it's loaded with Brazilian pepper. The wrong plant in the wrong place just causes all kinds of ecological issues. So you want to have those removed and put in, you know, the right stuff that should be there. And we're going to have a class coming up about that. Another thing you want to do as a homeowner is when you take your puppies out for a walk, or even in your own yard, pick up the poo. I'm sorry, it's gross. These are Dr. Lester's Huskies. I have two itty bitty tiny little 8-pounders. So picking up their poo is not as much of a chore as he has, but we want to do that because in you know, in our pets' waste, there's pathogens that are not good for any animal or human, plus, you know, just adds more nitrates to the system. Yes, all kind of animals poop on the ground, but we do what we can because, you know, there's a lot more people on Earth than there used to be. We have a lot more pets than we used to be. So let's just clean that up. If you have a septic system, I kind of talked about that a lot, but we want you to get your septic together. Do regular maintenance on that septic system. Have it inspected every 2 or 3 years. Make sure, you know, for your cost and for your health and for the health of the environment, that it's operating correctly. This is a website the Florida Department of Environmental Protection has available at limited times, which is not at this moment, but it could be opening at some point this year, an incentive program for a septic upgrade. If you think you may be in need of one, it's not going to be cheap. Like I mentioned, it's going to be that nitrate reducing septic tank. So find this webpage to see if the upgrade incentive program is up and running, you know, when you may need that new septic system. And I'll be glad to email that to you as well. Now, for those of you literally on the edge, for those of you living on the edge, right on the water, and that was a group of people I just spoke to a couple of weeks ago. It was a property owners association for Hernando Beach. So I told them a lot of this. You are very specific at the gate guardians of our water, whether you live on a canal, on a river, on a lake, near a spring. You are right there at the gate. So do not throw those lawn clippings into the water. Of course, no chemicals, anything like that. You want to have a 10-foot buffer. And that actually is part of the fertilizer ordinance for those of you living right on the water. Here in Hernando County, it's a 10-foot buffer. That might be changing. We may widen that. That might be one of the changes. Because in Citrus County, it's a 25-foot buffer of no chemicals whatsoever in that buffer between you and the water. So it's great to put some more native plants instead of trying to have turf there, unless the turf is doing well without any inputs. But native plants are going to work great to protect that waterfront and also provide habitat way more than turf will for a lot of insects and lizards and aquatic life. Now, if you want to, if you're considering building a new seawall and you want to know what I'm talking about with this riprap, Brittany Hallsharf would be the one to talk to, and I can give you her information. The best type of waterfront situation would be this natural vegetation here. That's best for storms and best for the sea life. But if you have a seawall, you might want to consider this, adding some riprap. What is riprap? Rocks, basically, things such as that. This is the riparian zone, so this is called riprap. If you're driving up north and you see along creeks, they have all those stones along the creeks and things. That also is riprap. What it does is disperse the energy. If someone's going by with a big boat, and causes the swale, that's going to disperse the energy a lot better than just your flat concrete seawall will. A vegetative sea line or shoreline is going to do even better at that. Or during a storm as well. If you're out visiting our beautiful springs, as I mentioned before, give a hoot, don't pollute. But something important I want you to remember is to stay as much as humanly possible in your vessel. Raise the motor in shallow water. If you're in a big boat and you're waiting for swimmers or tubers or kayakers to go by, don't move to the side where your boat can rip up the bottom of the, of the spring or the river. Just turn it off and wait for them to pass. And if you have an anchor, we encourage a mushroom anchor that grasps the bottom and releases the bottom and does not grab onto the vegetation there. Here's another chart from the Water Management District, and things they want you to remember: 9 things. Stay in that vessel as much as possible. If you jump out and want to go swimming and running around there, which we all did as kids, you are ripping up all of that precarious vegetation in the water that we are trying to get established, that seagrass that we're trying to put back there for the health of the waterway. So as fun as that may be, there's just too many of us now and we are destroying it. So stay in the vessel. If you have to leave the vessel, tie off in shallow waters. Don't, dock up on the riverbanks and rip up all the vegetation while you're doing that. I've done it accidentally, because I don't kayak enough to be a great kayaker, but as much as humanly possible, stay away from ripping up that vegetation. So don't trample on it or kick up the silt. avoid climbing on banks and walking on those sand point bars. I know I'm taking all your fun away, but what is the point of having fun if we're going to destroy the place where we were having the fun? And don't climb trees or use rope swings. That is pretty much a big no-no on our Wikiwachi River right now. And of course, don't leave litter or leave anything behind. The biggest thing we want you to do is to appreciate and protect our springs. I mentioned that it's Florida Friendly Landscaping's 30th birthday this year. And in celebration of that, you can go here to sign the pledge. And again, I can send you this link, or you can find it at ffl.ifs.ufl.edu. Sign the pledge. Some people have gone through the entire process of having a Florida friendly landscape in which you get a sign and have to go through this process. You can have a Florida friendly landscape simply by going and signing this pledge now. They made a bit of an easier process. You can still have the sign and go through that certification process, but they've also made it easier for everyone else just to go to this website and pledge that they're going to be Florida friendly in honor of Florida Friendly's 30th birthday. Also, to find out more about these springs and the information that I have found, here's the website, the Water Management District's website, where to find that information as well. Here are the upcoming classes that I mentioned. Aside from the rain barrel workshops, these are the other classes like this one. Next week, we're going to start every once in a while, instead of on a Wednesday, we're going to have a Friday lunch and learn from 12 until noon. So that's going to start this Friday, February 3rd. February already. Spring into Florida Friendly Landscaping. The next week I will be in person at the Spring Hill Library. That should say 10 o'clock. Sorry, didn't have the time there. I'll be there at 10 o'clock speaking about mulch, much ado about mulch. Then on Wednesday, February the 15th, Dr. Lester is going to join me, as well as Wednesday the 22nd, for part 1 and part 2 of Going Florida Friendly, converting your yard to a Florida friendly yard. And here's that Earth Day celebration I mentioned, April 22nd. Come on out to the Hernando County Master Gardener Volunteer Nursery. It's on Oliver Street in Brooksville. We'll be doing this from 9 until noon. We are still working on everything that we're going to do, but if you attended the rain barrel compost workshop the Thursday evening before this, that's when you'll pick your items up. Otherwise, anybody else can come as well. They always have Florida friendly plants for sale, as well as native plants. We hope to have native plant experts on hand, master gardeners on hand. There's going to be a kids craft table. Recycling information will be on hand. I already got confirmations. Hernando County Mosquito Control will be there. Hernando Audubon will be there. They'll have birdhouses available for donations. 4-H might be there, and Hernando County Emergency Management is going to be there. Plus, we'll have workshops. I already got a confirmation for a macro photography workshop, taking pretty pictures of flowers like this one I did there. Propagation workshop and a pruning demonstration should also be available. So that's going to be a really fun morning. You can find this class as well as many others on my Facebook. You can keep up with information. And on Hernando County Government YouTube, this class will be available within a few days. In the meantime, there's, I think, 102 other ones you can watch on Hernando County Government YouTube to continue your learning. Again, my email is LillyB@hernandocounty.us. So if you have any questions or would like a copy of this program, please send me an email, and I'm going to turn off the recording and address the chats for the live people. So thank you for everybody listening, and have a wonderful Florida friendly day.